Alright, I've brought everything down here. We're not ready for paint yet. The first thing we have to do is tape up things we don't want to paint. The most important would probably be the things here that I don't want to paint. I'm actually going to take this sticker off and just completely remove it, but this one I don't want to paint over. To make it look professional, I'm going to stick a piece of tape over it and cut it out. I'll show you what that looks like when I'm done. And we need to tape up the buttons so that we're not painting the whole thing all the way down, we're just painting the part that you see. We need to make standers for things like this so that it stands up. And we need to make an entire holder for this because we're only painting this top portion and the button. We're not painting anything that's smooth or this lip here. The triggers also need to be on standards so that they only paint the part that we want. And this needs to be on standards so we only paint the part it wants. And this just needs to be covered so we don't paint anything but the button itself. Alright, so I'm going to show you guys how to do that real quick. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make stencils. I've already made my stencil. It's the monster symbol. As you can see, I'm doing other controllers at the same time. These are other stencils. But here's the monster symbol. Not sure how well you can see that. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a pretend stencil that I'm not actually using for this. So let me move this stuff out of the way here so you can see what I'm doing. Alright, I'm just going to make something random. I'm going to put an R. I don't really care what it looks like. I'm just going to make an R. It's going to look totally crappy because I am not an artist. As you can see, I just laid down 2 pieces of blue painter's tape. And then all we have to do to retrieve the stencil from this is, if we did the stencil right, is we pull back the tape and the R will stay. There's the first piece of tape. Take the piece off slowly if you're not sure, just to make sure that your corners were crisp. All my corners were crisp. Alright, and there's my R, and that's how you make a stencil. I'm not actually using the stencil is garbage, but just to show you how I make a stencil, just like that. You can lay paper on top of this, and then cut through the paper and the stencil for tracing. That's what I usually do. So I put the paper on top of this, tape the paper down, and then I cut out of the paper the piece I want to keep. I'm sure I can find over here somewhere. See, here's the paper. I had the flat piece of paper, and this was still inside of it. Then out of this, I laid this on top of the blue tape and cut out my shape, and it looks great. So anyway, now what we're going to do is we're going to make standers for all of this stuff. There's kind of a specific way to make most of the standers. The one for the bumper is probably the easiest one. You take a length of tape, you stick it over top of the centerpiece, because you don't care about the centerpiece, you're not seeing the centerpiece. And then you fold it so that it points straight down, like that. And then what you're going to do when you actually attach it is you take 2 other pieces of tape, you stick one here, you stick one here, and you fold them separate, and you stick it onto the table like that. And then you use one last piece of tape to steady it. See how it's folding this way? Just do that, now your problem solved. And that's how a stander for that works. I'm actually going to keep this. I'm actually using this stander. Most of these are really quick and really easy to make, but some of them are a little more complicated. Now I'm going to do one of the more complicated ones, which is the trigger, because you have to be very careful not to cover anything you're seeing. So it's in good judgment to cover the least amount of this as you possibly can while still getting grip. Okay, now we got that like that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to cut it. If I frickin' can, I mean. We're going to cut it so we can get some splits out of it. That's a little bit shorter. Now we're just going to cut lines straight down. I'd recommend using an X-Acto knife. I use a razor blade because I use a razor blade all the time, so I'm kind of skilled with a razor blade, and I'm okay with using a razor blade all the time. Okay, now we see we've got these little wings here. Now it'll stand. That stander's done. Do the same thing for the other trigger. This stander is actually really easy, but it's got to be the most sturdy structure. So what you do here is you lay a piece of tape like this, fold it over, and you just want a pillar of tape. You're just going to keep going over this spot. You fold that, make that solid, and you just keep going over it. Try to make it as stiff as possible. The more times you go around, the stiffer it is. Okay, there's that. And for this stander, you're going to use a couple pieces of tape, I'm sure, to create tension. Now this is going to want to fall this way. So what we do is we take a piece of tape and we pull it back like this, and there's your stander. You don't have to do these the exact same way I am. The ways I'm doing it are just the ways I found works. This should have a stander. It doesn't need one. I'm going to show you how to do one, but I don't think I'm actually going to use it while I'm painting, just because I don't particularly care all that much about this piece. The easiest stander I found to make for this is just to go around these the holes in the bottom here, make sure it's sticking, which I'm not having that much luck with. That's why I don't like doing this one. It doesn't actually need to have a stander, and it really doesn't want. It's really not easy to make a stander for it. All right, and you fold this back. Now that'll stick, and then you just need another piece of tape for tension, like that, and that's a stander. Okay. The hardest one is this piece right here, because you actually need to have a little bit of skill with whatever cutting tool you're using. Take a long-ass piece of tape like that. It can be too long. That's okay. You just can't have it be too short, because that's a pain in the butt. Okay, you use one of the flat sides, and you go along here. I hope you can see this. And you're just going to keep wrapping it around just under this seam. You're going to want to go straight over the button, so push the button down and pretend the button's not even there for now. And you're just going to keep doing this until you've used all the tape you grabbed out. Alright, now this stander will already stand by itself. No need for that extra tape grab. What we do have to do is cut out the button here. So we're just going to push our razor blade down next to the button. I use a lot of tape, so it will be kind of hard to cut, but it will still cut. You cut right around the button, as close to the button as humanly possible. And then once you do it, you just peel off the tape, and there's your button. The button is sticking out now. Now it'll get painted if you paint it. Okay, the last little thing, short little piece of tape over this lip here. Make sure it sticks by folding it around onto itself. It'll probably stick. Remember, the tape doesn't have to stick forever. The tape only has to stick through the first layer of paint, because once you paint your first layer, the paint will hold it onto here, not the adhesive of the tape. Alright, and there you go for that. Okay, the last one I'm going to show you is the buttons. You just get a length of tape. You only need half the piece of tape, because these aren't really big. Then you wrap this about halfway down. Oops, you should start at the edge, like that. And then you just go around a couple times, making this come out like that. You're going to use your razor blade, whatever blade you decided to use, to make wings for it. So you just... Well, that didn't work out really well. Or I guess another way you could do it is once you have that covered, you don't need to have it perfect. You're not going to see most of this. Is you just take a tiny piece of tape, stick it like that. I don't trust that just yet. Take another piece of tape and stick it on the opposite side. And now this won't go anywhere. So there's that stander. Alright. That's all I'm going to show you. Next we're going to go right over to paint. We're going to start painting this damn thing.